We begin in the Middle East and more violence in the occupied West Bank, this time near the city of Jericho. An Israeli-American man has been killed in his car during a drive-by shooting. Israeli forces say Palestinian gunmen targeted several vehicles before fleeing the scene. The incident comes a day after two Israelis were killed by a Palestinian in the West Bank town of Hawara. Israeli settlers responded by attacking Palestinian homes and property in the area, killing one Palestinian man. Our correspondent Rebecca Ritters filed this report.
Another standoff on the streets of Hawara. Just as we arrive, so does this Israeli settler, who gets out of his car to confront a group of Palestinians. Surrounded by the foreign press, Israeli soldiers intervene.
Tensions are still really high here in Hawara. We're standing at the entrance to the town. You can see there's an increased military presence. This is one of the main thoroughfares for settlers trying to get from the settlement of Itzar to Jerusalem, and they're using it. You can see here the cars honking every time a car comes through here. There's provocation. Really, it feels like anything could happen.
On Sunday, a Palestinian gunman shot dead two Israeli brothers in this town, which led to a revenge attack by Israeli settlers who rampaged through the streets, torching cars and houses. One Palestinian was shot dead in the violence, four others badly injured.
I left the shop to pick up one of my employees and I saw 400 settlers setting fire to it. They burned the container, burnt the warehouses, burnt the storehouse for electrical appliances and destroyed the house. They didn't leave anything.
As tensions escalate, Israel's security minister has urged citizen restraint.
I want to comment on what happened in Hawara. I understand the hard feelings, but this isn't the way. We can't take the law into our own hands.
Instead, he said it should be Israel's government and security forces who, quote, crush the enemy. Fresh reports have now emerged from Jericho, also in the occupied West Bank. A suspected Palestinian gunman shot dead another Israeli. All this turmoil erupting on the heels of an emergency summit in Jordan, where Israeli and Palestinian officials agreed on measures to try to cool things down. But the ongoing violence putting any efforts of de-escalation on shaky ground.
And correspondent Rebecca Ritters, who filed that report, joins us from Jerusalem. How did you experience the situation in Hawara?
Well, the situation there, Sarah, as you could see in that report, is nothing short of tense. Tensions very high after Sunday's attack following the shooting of those two Israeli brothers, and then the Palestinian call for the settler call for vengeance, and they're going into that town and attacking homes and cars and Palestinians on Sunday night. We saw an increased military presence in the town. As I mentioned in the piece, it's a town. It's a thoroughfare that settlers use to get from Jerusalem to some of the settlements on the other side. And so they come into contact with Palestinians in the village. There was a lot of provocation while we were there. All the settlers, as they drove through, honking horns and creating provocations and more tension. We saw Palestinians calling back and this back and forth. Now, Hawara is a hotspot. As I say, it's that thoroughfare town. So settler violence or settler clashes isn't uncommon, but the extent to what we saw on Sunday isn't very common. Some are saying it's unprecedented, or at least since scenes from the end of the Intifada in the early 2000s. So tensions very high, but not just there. As we were leaving the town, the reports were coming out about that shooting in Jericho. Now, Jericho's not normally considered one of the major hotspots, but you can see these things popping up all across the West Bank as tensions flare. So things not feeling certainly like they're going to settle down anytime soon, Sarah.
What efforts are being made to reduce the risk of further escalation?
Well, we've, of course, seen all the international calls for calm. We've seen even calls from calm from, certain Israeli politicians, Benjamin Netanyahu saying don't take matters into your own hands, and other ministers echoing that. But we have seen some ministers from the far right, from Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir's party, condoning the violence and, in fact, supporting it. So, the tensions are being stoked regardless, and I think, we are seeing calls for calm. We saw a couple of weeks ago as tensions were flaring again a few weeks ago after another raid in the northern West Bank. We saw it timed with the US Secretary of State here, and he was calling for calm. We did see a momentary lull in tensions, but even given things like the summit that was held in Jordan on Sunday, and out of that summit there were assurances from the Israeli side saying that they would halt settlement expansion at least for a few months to try and calm things ahead of the Ramadan, the Islamic Ramadan holy month coming up, and everyone worried about things spiralling out of control. But it is hard to see with out of that meeting, Benjamin Netanyahu said, no, we're not going to halt these settlement expansions. So definitely a lot of tit-for-tat going on. It's very hard to kind of know where it's going, but it certainly doesn't feel like it's going in the right direction.
DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters, thank you.
Well, let's get more on this from DW's Middle East analyst, Shani Razanis. Welcome to the studio, Shani. So we have this sudden and very localised explosion of violence, which presumably has not come out of nowhere.
Well, of course not. We see it as this is what's happening at the backdrop of very strong political weakness on both sides, Israelis and Palestinian side. On the Palestinian side, we have Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of Fatah in the West Bank. He is a weak old leader who is being challenged by the fractions on the ground, by Hamas from Gaza. And we see the unrest bubbling, and he has very little to do to stop and contain that. On an Israeli side...
Because he's seen by the Palestinians as a weak leader, so
exactly.
What do we care what he has to say?
Exactly, waiting for his inevitable end, basically, of his regime. And then when we look at Israel, Netanyahu, being, standing on trial, his legal situation is so complicated, he found himself only being able to form a coalition with the extreme right and the settlers. And they feel emboldened now. They feel they have the upper hand. They can control Netanyahu. They can lead the government's actions. And he has very little to do to stop them or calm things down. And again, this is bubbling on the surface, in the ground, in the most heated places of daily contact between settlers and Palestinians. Things that have been so far quiet are just rising up because of the boldness that we feel on both sides.
So it sounds like there is quite a risk of further escalation.
Definitely, and we're looking into the 22nd of March as the most crucial day. It's the beginning of Ramadan. The area is always very tense before the beginning of Ramadan and during the month of Ramadan. We saw an American attempt just a few days ago in Jordan to try and calm things down in a summit to bring things into this month a bit more calmly. This hasn't really yielded any results, so things are looking tense.
OK. We have another meeting today, this time the new Israeli foreign minister here in Germany with his counterpart, Annalena Baerbock. What do you expect from that?
Well, the Germans will, like other Europeans that have already responded to what's happening, are looking for things to come down. The whole world, we see international eyes towards Israel, towards Jerusalem. They want things to come down. However, it's not going to be as simple because Netanyahu himself, on the one hand, after Jordan, where he promised to put a freeze on the settlements, right after he himself came out with a statement saying this will not come to full terms. So he is very much, Netanyahu is caught between international criticism and the world and the more extreme fractions of his government. And for now, it seems like there's very little breakthrough coming. But of course, all sides, especially the Israeli security apparatus, is trying to bring things down. And they were also the one leading the Jordan summit. But there's just too many free-flying factors up there in the air, flaming, fanning the flames. So it's a challenge.
OK. Shani Razanis, you've summed that up for us very nicely. Thank you. DW's Middle East analyst.
You're welcome, Phil.
Thank you.